Hello, and welcome again to Spotlight on Home.
Hey guys. All right, so we promised you a Thanksgiving episode defending your decision to homeschool, and we wanted to give it to you so it's fresh in your mind. So if you're at that Thanksgiving dinner and you got that annoying, obnoxious relative who's kind of, I don't know, giving you a hard time about homeschooling.
Well, they think you're crazy.
Or you think, yeah, no, that's true. You're right.
You think you're crazy?
You think you're nuts for homeschooling. We wanted to give you more or less a cheat sheet. So you kind of had some facts to help you defend your decision. Not that you really need to defend your decision, but, you know, every once in a while you'll find someone, and a lot of times I think it's typically like an educator who may be retired now, and they hear that you're going to homeschool, and they feel like, well, what makes you think you're qualified to homeschool, right? And then and it's not so much it's like your decision to do it. It almost is probably for them a personal attack. Like they think they held some special magic key, and all of a sudden here you come, just gonna do it, and it really all the credentials that they worked for, they almost feel threatened or negated by. And so I think that's the root of probably someone who's giving you a hard time about it, or just really, it's just ignorant. They really just don't know. So we just wanted to kind of put together a little podcast, and, you know, we'll put these in the show notes too, so you can even print it out and have it with you if you want to have it come to mind real quick. But really, it's just to give you a boost of confidence before heading into some maybe obnoxious family members for the holidays. Good times.
And yeah, it is the crazy time of year. Yeah. You know, we're going to be seeing that uncle that has a very strong opinion, or a mother or a mother-in-law. I mean, or a spouse. And that's okay. And we used some critical words here, ignorant, things like that. We're not telling you to call anybody ignorant, because to be genuinely ignorant of something is not really an attack. If you're ignorant of something, you simply don't know.
You just don't know, right?
And that there are other answers. And I have my file here of a few things. You'll have to pardon me. I'm going to read them a little bit.
He took the notes this week for our research.
I have links, so this isn't just opinion stuff. These are organizations that have done some study. And I can tell you that one of them makes it abundantly clear that it's irregard whether or not the... did I use that word right? Regardless, whether or not the parent was a prior educator or not.
Good thing.
Yeah, and because listen to me go. But so we're trying to give you some confidence and some ability. And, you know, sometimes when it's family, the pressure, when they lean on you, it's hard to come up with or to express why you're so passionate, and maybe what the real reasons are. Right. So we're here to help.
Alrighty, so you want to get started here?
Yeah, I can start here with a couple of things. The National Household Education Survey, the NHES, I have a link for that we'll put in the notes. Over 26% cite a negative environment as their most important reason as to why people choose to homeschool. And 90% list it as at least one reason. So that's over a fourth of the parents out there that have finally chosen to homeschool that said it was about, you know, bullying and theft and assault. Actually, technically, in the research, I found the numbers are going down since last decade, or maybe just the decade prior, 2006 through 10. Those were very, very high years. And it's not only student to student, it's also student to teacher, which I know some of us have seen in the news.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about that. Or teacher to student, right? Like
sometimes teacher to student, as well as some real bad shenanigans that teachers are. I don't know if there's more of it, or if there's just more reporting on it.
Maybe it's probably just being more reported, hopefully.
But the one that gets me is I see a society that has no respect for authority figures. And if your children are getting a steady diet of where students are not just disrespectful, but actually physically violent to teachers, even if the teacher is wrong in something, those things can be addressed through proper protocol, or even changing of a school, or hopefully maybe that you've chosen to homeschool.
And I know too, like a lot of, because I have my master's degree in health education, but ironically, when I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity, if I just wanted to go one more semester, I could sit for the Pennsylvania school exam and become a certified teacher in the state of Pennsylvania. And I was like, I'm never teaching kids. No way. I just want to graduate.
Joke's on you,
Joke's on
sister.
me, right? Yeah. So, but I didn't want to. But really, the only thing, my major was health. So I learned how to teach health. But it wasn't like I memorized health facts. But one of the things that we had to learn a lot about was classroom management, and a lot of it was like behavior management. So really, if you are homeschooling, you can easily cut your homeschool day in half of what it needs to be right off the bat.
Absolutely.
Like you can do a very thorough home education with 3 to 4 hours. Easily.
Easily.
Did I skip ahead?
No,
for you?
you
Okay.
didn't. I want to make a couple of points here. If you're not sure whether or not there's danger at the school, I know it started for us. We're in the New York metro area, and New York and Los Angeles and places, they kind of rhyme with each other.
We're in the northeast corner, so it does tend to run more liberal.
Yes.
We would love to
But
move
if your school,
more heartland, but
if your kids can't get into the classroom without first going through metal detectors, then those things are there for a reason. I'm not against the metal detectors because they do serve a purpose, but if that purpose is so persistent at your school, and I think here I saw a thing, in 2003, 48% of students saw cameras in their schools. That number by 2011 is 77%.
Wow.
Now, I'm not anti-camera by any stretch. We even had a little business where there was kids involved many years ago, and I suggested cameras, but for the good side. Most of these cameras are in position not to protect, not to survey the children. They're there to report on crime, and so if there's a lot of cameras, a lot of metal detectors, you're already really, really behind the 8 ball. I have links to all of these things as well. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, also, listen to your kids. I had a relative, their one daughter, she was a junior or a senior in high school, and she was not thriving. She was, actually, I know a few young ladies that were junior, seniors in high school, public school. One started pulling her eyebrows out and really struggling. And so the mom was like, okay, this isn't my kid. I got to get her out of the situation, and wisely withdrew her from public school, started homeschooling, gave her daughter space to kind of heal more or less. And the daughter wound up thriving. Now there's another girl I know who is similar situation, but decided to just push through it and continue, like more or less forcing her to continue with school, just because it was like in her mind there was no other option. And hopefully if you have a friend like that, like maybe their children aren't thriving, or the kids are like, Mom, this isn't right, or I don't like it there, or they may not come out and say like, I'm being bullied, or because they may be embarrassed by it. But, if your kids are miserable, like life is too short and their childhoods are too precious to force them into a situation. A lot of parents justify it like, well, they're going to have to learn how to get along. But you know what? No, not really. If you had to go to work every day in a place that you absolutely hated with people who literally made your life terrible, you'd go and look for a new job.
Right.
There actually isn't any situation.
It's not compulsory to work
right.
there.
Yeah. Like there is no situation where you would force yourself to do something like that. So to force that on a child and tell them, they have to just buck up or get over it, I think is really mean. So I know there are situations where there's just no other option, and definitely those exist. However, if you have other avenues, but you're just afraid, I think you're in the right place, because we can definitely help you navigate them.
I want to add one last point to that. The bullying and the violence, if there's any of that you suspect, by the nature of social media, just because that kid leaves the school and gets on the bus and finally gets off the bus and walks through their door, they are still connected.
Yeah.
They open up that laptop or they go on that phone, and that overwhelm, that nagging sensation, that horror that they have at school continues. Now, unfortunately, what you're going to have to do is limit your child. It'll come off as a punishment, but it's certainly by no means is it a punishment. It is absolutely the right thing to do. I am not anti-social media, but
our oldest kids have social media accounts, and actually our one of our children
I begged Emily to get it, and she won't.
Well, our second oldest is away at college, and part of her college program is like certain days they are completely unplugged, and because she's just busy doing life there and school and she just and because they do restrict the usage of a lot of electronics, she's like, Mom, I really don't miss it at all. It's actually kind of nice. And it's nice to hear because it's like, because you have a life and you're doing things besides just, being connected constantly to people. And we've talked about this in another podcast too. Like, you're the sum result of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And they say folly is bound in the heart of a child. So, and the companion of fools suffers harm. So you're putting your children into a companion of fools,
right,
and then expecting them not to be harmed. And so for us, we kind of think of our house as more of a greenhouse where their roots will go strong. They are being nurtured. They're not being isolated.
The nutrients are rich.
Right. Yeah. The rich soil, the love, the sunshine, the good food, it will grow a strong and healthy child. And then they'll know what they need to know to get out into the world. And then, as they get older and stronger and bigger, then you can like harden them off like you would a plant, but you don't have to do that.
Right.
So,
the next main one that I had seen here is a higher quality of education.
Oh yeah.
Flat out.
Yeah.
The number 2 complaint from that National Household Education Survey was a dissatisfaction with academic instruction. That's pretty major. I mean, between the kids being afraid and then a subpar instructors.
Yeah.
And it's not a dig on teachers, but
No,
the teachers are doing what they believe is right.
Or what they have to do, right?
Yeah.
Like they tell them teach Common Core or teach this stupid critical race
Common
theory.
Core is my next item
Yeah.
here. Now, Common Core is a funny thing. I have a couple of friends that when they finally saw Common Core, they said, wow, I wish they taught it to me like this. Now, they were admittedly not good at math. But Common Core breaks it down so elementary that it made it very understandable to those who weren't wired for that type of math. And for that person, that's great. But for 22 other kids where they don't need that, you are slowing them down. You may as well, if you want them to run a race with an anchor tied behind them and dragging through, that's the same thing.
Right.
And this is where customization in education becomes critical. If your child needs Common Core type learning, you can give it to them. If they don't, move on. I remember the kids and a couple of the girls in grammar school saying, but I don't understand why it equals this. And I used to sit there and say, why do you need to care? Why do you care?
Yeah.
It equals it.
Right.
Move on. And maybe you'll figure it out later, maybe you won't, but who cares?
Right. Well, that's the nice thing, too, about homeschooling. You can teach to their kids' strength, and you don't have, so if they're not really strong at math, then you give them their basics, what they need to know to, like, be a successful adult, and they probably aren't going to go into the field of engineering anyway, right? Their strengths may be in art or literature or something in a different way, and so that's okay. It's okay to not, you can teach to your child's strength and instead of like trying to only teach to their weaknesses. Like in real life too, as an adult, play to your strengths. You'll get ahead further faster as opposed to always just trying to plug the holes of your weaknesses. Use your strengths and leverage them for success. And you can do that. You have the flexibility to do that in a homeschool where if they're in regular school, they just have to go along with the herd. They're not allowed to have an individualized instruction. And so because you can teach to their strengths, this is from HSLDA, the homeschoolers score 15 to 30% higher than public school students on their standardized academic achievement test.
Did
you have the same stat
on my third page?
There's a
reason why I got to mention it again
later.
Right.
Okay. But also, because they score so much higher, they said that, after a year of being homeschooled, so say you start homeschooling them in 3rd grade. By the time they're in 4th grade, they'll start testing at like a 5th grade level once they're homeschooled. So they almost immediately start to go up higher right away. And then they said by the time they hit 8th grade, they're typically about 4 grades ahead of their peers in public school. And I noticed that too. Like my one son, he's very cerebral. He likes to read. I mean, he's happiest like alone in his room just reading books. Like he's not a very, he has his friends, but he's not like very outgoing and loud and always around. Like he's just quiet. But he was reading in 5th grade at a 12th grade level.
Right.
Like he's just, and because in 5th grade in Pennsylvania, you have to have a standardized test done. So he did it, and he was already reading at a 12th grade level then, because that's just his
which
bent.
is higher than most of the kids in 12th grade in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So I mean, that you have and really, so some parents think, well, I can't pull my child out of school because they're struggling. I think you can flip that right around and say, I have to pull them out because they're struggling. Right. And a lot of parents, because of COVID, had their kids home and started homeschooling and started seeing like, wow, they're getting ahead quicker. Like, I really enjoy this process. Now, there were plenty that didn't, and that's fine. But there were so many that were like, oh, we really enjoyed this. And I can see they're getting ahead faster. Like, I'm able to teach them more, and our frustration level isn't as high because the homework isn't so ridiculous, and all these things. We can have more interests and all these better things for them. So let's keep this party going.
Keep this party going. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna have a few just bullet points.
Okay, go
Homeschoolers offers much more control, which is something that we've been saying about 50 different ways prior to now. Public school is not providing the right skills. And that comes down the line even worse here. Career and college readiness survey shows less than half of high school students, the students, not the people reporting on them, the students feel academically unprepared.
I felt unprepared. I remember my first day in college coming home crying, and I went to public school, and it was psychology.
I have a link for that, so it's not just us talking.
And I took psychology, and the teacher was saying, okay, you need an APA format, and you need all this stuff, and I'm like, a works cited page or whatever it was called for APA. Or that might be MLA. I don't remember. But I remember coming home like, I never heard of this before. And it was Psychology 101. So really, at some point, I should have heard of this, at least my senior year in high school. But I didn't. And I was freaking out because I was thinking, oh, my goodness, I'm so far behind and all these things. So I can actually attest to that in a personal,
I wasn't ready because I didn't.
Well, you didn't.
I did terribly in school, but that was another story. Professors are also say they believe students are less ready. The percent that said they were ready has dropped from 28%, which is already an abysmal number, to 14%.
Yeah.
Now, that's on a 10-year span.
Right.
They've gone from 28% ready, according to the professors, to 14%. Now, that's horrifying.
Keep in mind, too, college professors prefer homeschooled students to traditionally educated students because they are self-motivated. They tend to be more mature. They don't need to be spoon-fed information.
They typically think outside the box better.
They have critical thinking skills, and they can kind of they're just more mature students.
Yeah, and on the this will be my last point on the higher quality thing. Ironically, less homework is a major plus for students. I know it would have changed my life.
Yeah.
No homework pressure, no homework wars with the parents.
Well, that comes down probably to a better relationship then with your and like time off.
Well,
you need downtime.
I don't know if we had spoken about it on the podcast or if we just spoke about it privately. My school expected minimum 2 hours worth of homework.
Yeah, after being there 8 hours.
Right, after
so crazy.
Yeah. So there's the psychological thing where I didn't do my homework, or I know I have all these things piling up on me. They had a tremendous negative effect on my life.
Right.
To the point where it started to affect my health at times.
Well, it did. Like, he had psoriasis terribly.
Yeah, actually,
and you would
frightened.
Get sick in front in the parking lot before you'd go in.
Yeah,
like,
it was bad. I hated it.
But that's kind of the point. Like, I feel like even your parents were not in tune enough to understand, like, you were struggling.
They were regular people.
I know that. But like, they didn't pick up on the fact, like, you were struggling, and that education wasn't serving you.
No,
you know
what
I mean? And so you didn't learn what you needed to learn because you were so busy dealing with, the other stuff you had going on. And here's another thing, too, for boys, I think. The homeschool boys, I have 5 sons. I wouldn't put, I do. It's time you found out.
Oh, thanks.
But I personally feel like to force a boy to sit in a chair for 8 hours a day is cruel, because they're going to be wiggly. Boys are wiggly. My boys, let's do math, then go outside and run. Let's sit down for reading for 15 minutes, then go outside and run. Let's go ahead and build this, and then go outside and run. Like, they need that
Or
break.
let's go swimming, and then we'll come back later. Yeah, sure.
Right.
Sure.
And so, like, kids, for me, I noticed definitely with my boys, they needed like those physical bursts of energy in order to get through the day. If I just expected them to do bam, 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 their schoolwork right in a row, they would be labeled ADD, because they are just not capable of doing that.
Fighting them.
I'd be fighting them, and
you.
our relationship would be worse. And so they said boys score 87, this is from HSLDA again, 87% on reading tests when they're homeschooled versus only 43% in public schools. So they score 87% homeschool boys on reading tests versus 43 for the public school boys. So if you have a son who is a struggling reader, and you're like, oh, I don't know, he should be there, he needs that extra support, or I don't know, he has ADD, and you're fighting and you're struggling and you're going around in circles, get him home.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do it, get him home. Let him be wiggly. Let him run. The kids, there are kinesthetic
Don't let him run
learners.
over you.
No, but you may be serving him better, giving him that homeschool
recraft their education style.
Yeah.
I was mistaken. I have another whole section based on this very thing, the higher quality education. I can't even read my own notes.
Maybe we'll do that as a separate.
We
a
could do
separate
it,
one,
but
too.
I
Like,
just
these
have a
are
couple of
just, like,
stats.
bullet
And
points.
homeschooled students tend to score higher, as you had mentioned before, on state and federal tests. I have a link for that as well, by a margin of 15 to 30%, which I
Right.
think is the exact same one you said, points higher. And this was all regardless of the parents' experience, whether or not they had any teaching experience prior. So
Yeah.
that alone, right
Yeah.
there, should put a lot of minds and
Right.
hearts at ease.
Right.
And I have another interesting tidbit that they included in this. These results are even greater for black students, 23 to 42% points higher than their peers.
So it's even better.
So it's even better
That's awesome.
in certain minority circles.
Right.
Which, that tells you, if in these tougher schools, the results are going to be greater just from coming home.
They're better off home.
They are better off home.
Right. And homeschool children, like, I know sometimes parents are worried, like, oh my goodness, I don't know, my kids are, they're going to be isolated or whatever. They said, they'll engage in over 5 activities outside of the home, and they'll have time to do it because they'll have time to have interests and hobbies.
Social interaction is the next
Yeah,
topic
they have
here.
they have time for hobbies and friends because they're not bogged down with sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day and then coming home and having to do homework and
Right.
fighting with their parents. Like, they have time for relationships, they have time for social engagement, they have time for interests and hobbies.
Right.
Actually, if I recall correctly, years ago I was listening to the National Spelling Bee, and a lot of the parents who had their kids in traditional school were annoyed that homeschool kids were in it because they said
Right.
they had an unfair advantage, because kids who were into spelling had that luxury of time where they could just practice it because it was part of a hobby they enjoyed. And so they had this luxury where these kids that were stuck in school all day had
So-
to do it like
So what you're saying is it's like steroids for athletes.
Yeah.
It's steroids for the brain, except
Right.
it's all natural and it's coming from you.
Right.
Who else would you want it to come from? So improved social interaction is the third main point here. You have less exposure to bullying and all these other negative peer pressures that we are not really interested, that some of us may remember going through.
I remember middle school
yeah,
was the
sure.
worst too.
And it frees the students to have a tailor-made social interactions that you bring them to, that support your values.
Yeah.
And what else do I have here?
You could be the
And
gatekeeper.
It
really,
supports
that
your
you should
vision,
be.
or your remember the
Yeah.
the vision statement we had
Right.
asked everybody to make.
Yeah.
Does sending them there with 35 other kids support your vision statement,
Mm-hmm.
or you taking your children to the doctor and having proper interactions and going to the stores and doing all the things of life?
Right.
Also, you take the curriculum that the students have, and you can make their whole world about it. You're learning French with your kid. Well, you got Post-it notes or a label maker, and you put the French word all over everything in the house. You know, the clock, the TV, the computer, the microphone, the camera, you know, whatever it is. And then, you know, the verbs are different. You're going to have to, you know, but you can create that and then look into the history. Then you can do French history. Then you can do French cooking. Then you can do French. You can immersive style learning that you don't get.
Right.
The bell rings and off you go to the next thing. And it improves social skills because homeschool is so flexible.
Right.
To do so many different things. Instead of here, this is the number that sort of really rung my bell here. Instead of 150 days of seated lecture.
Usually it's 180. They're supposed to be in school.
Yeah, but I guess they're counting.
But yeah,
30 days of various other field stuff. But you know, to hear that number, pardon me, of seated lecture, you're asking that of a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah, and almost.
You're out of your mind.
And here's another stat to throw at you. So 67% of homeschooled kids will graduate college, while 57% of public school kids would graduate college. So even graduating from your homeschool, going to college, 67% of those people will graduate versus 57% of the kids coming out of public school will graduate high school. So even their chances of going to college and graduating from college are also higher.
Do you have anything else more on that point? Because I can move on to the next one.
Yeah, move on.
Now, I'm going to use a term here, learning LD students, learning disabled, or learning, and, you know, usually when I had heard, like, the term handicapped, they say differently abled. Well, in other words, you know, if you're missing a leg, you're missing a leg.
Yeah.
But if you are a different styled learner, it's a very, very different situation. So homeschooling definitely supports a child that is learning differences versus disability, because they throw the word around very quickly, whether it's ADHD or some sort of dyslexia or whatever it is.
Right.
They just learn differently, and it requires resources, and it might not even be the fault of the school. Public schools just lack the specific resources to accomplish this well, or there's maybe so many different kids that have so many different requirements. It's just not even feasible at that level. Homeschooling has a plethora of curriculum for learning differences, and I have a link to I guess one of the more popular ones, and you can still use public resources that you need. You still have access to typically your local region for whatever resources that the schools do offer. So you're not without. Right.
And you can get creative. We've talked about that in other podcasts as well.
Do you have anything in terms of that? We have friends with several Down syndrome children. Oh, yeah. And they homeschool because, I mean, you could take them to those programs, but those programs are very limited.
Well, they really only... I don't know because I don't speak, I'm not in that situation, but I think a lot of times it's teaching life skills. They recreate home at the school to teach them, you know what I mean? So she just does it at home. But I mean, obviously, that's going to be different for every parent. Right. And so that's okay. You got to figure that out.
Well, we have everybody out there from one end of the range to the other.
Right. And so, I think, too, what you want to keep in mind is so that, with the whole idea of like the frog being in the pot and you turn the heat up slowly, does it know it's getting hot? We kind of only know things because like we were born in the 70s and now we're parents in the 2020s. But, so a standard education is really all we knew. But, go back 200 years and that wasn't the norm. And when you look at okay, so why all of a sudden is this kids are segregated by age and they're segregated by these, where is the standards coming from? And how am I going to make sure my child needs to know what they need to know by a certain time? And it's really even age segregation that came out of Prussia, and they purposely created and designed schools and divided it up by age to mimic Prussia was trying to rebuild their military, and they said we'll start as young as we can and we'll just already get them used to the way we divide up the school, and so we'll segregate them by age, and then that way they'll just go straight on into the military after that and have these little platoons and classrooms. And then the other component of that was so they went and saw it. They saw it was efficient. They brought it back to the States. they said, okay, well, we've got so many people coming in. It was, at that time there was tons of immigration coming over, and they said, okay, this is probably the easiest way to assimilate these people into our country, and so they started doing that as well. And then, the assembly line too, during the Industrial Revolution, and creating a standardization, and just making the most efficient use of things on an assembly line, having one person just be really specified in doing one thing, made the assembly line move quicker and more efficiently. And they took that idea and they put it into school. And so instead of teaching to the whole, instead of immersing math with language and literature and sciences and history and context, and having it all be a cohesive thought idea for discussion and critical thinking and formation of a mind, it was like fractured and broken apart, and like, okay, you teach this grade math, you teach this science, and you teach history, you teach reading, but none of it is cohesive. None of it, everything is just fractured and separated, and we think it's normal because it's what we know. It's kind of what we just have been birthed into, but it really isn't. It is a fractured imitation, and it's built on an economic system that actually is no longer even feasible. It's built on a factory, it's to create good soldiers and good factory workers, really, and so if you want to create a child who can think and create and just do something besides like asking permission to, use the bathroom or get in line and stand there till you're told you're allowed to move and obey authority, and you can eat when you're told to eat. Instead, if you want to cultivate a child's brain because they were created in the image of God, bring them home, homeschool them.
Bring them home. And we stress this specifically now because we are a first world situation. This is a unique luxury, and it needs to be a luxury that we need to protect. I am 100% pro homeschool, but I do also remember that through history, people fought and died to accomplish what we would call public school. Revolutions were fought over, lacks of education for entire people groups.
And we've talked about that too.
Yes.
Like, we want people educated.
We want them educated. But what we see is now we have enough margin in our lives to recognize different ability in our kids or dangers and certain things that we can opt in or out of. Very important to opt out of certain things, whether you think they're moral issues or, even if you had a business issue, if you were a big businessman and you think that the school is teaching it wrong, take them out, man. Take them out. The problem, the downside to the factory style is very efficient, and it does educate the masses.
Well, what did you say? What was the quote from Les Mis? You said one of our very first.
The open door to a school and basically closes one to a prison. Yeah. Because, if you weren't educated, you couldn't work, and then you'd steal, and then you'd end up in prison or some sort of criminal. And those are the revolutions I'm talking about. And always recommend reading Les Mis. It's a steep ask, but what was I gonna say?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. A little bit. It's a little bit.
Sorry.
We do have a luxury here, and what I was going to say, that factory and fairly efficient, but at a very low level. We were reading a book the other day, and it talked about standardized tests and things like that. And if your child is a different type of learner, I saw a comic or a political cartoon. It has an elephant, a monkey, a giraffe, a horse, and a dog. And the teacher is sitting at the desk. And the final exam is...
a fish, right?
And like a fish. Something along those lines.
Yes, I know what
and the final exam was to climb the tree.
Right.
And obviously the elephant isn't going to do it, but the elephant is not without its talents.
Exactly.
It never forgets.
Right.
It's strong and all these other things. The giraffe, it can reach the leaves, but it certainly can't climb a tree. The monkey go right up.
Right.
But the monkey maybe doesn't swim.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And those are our children, and that's kind of an archaic analogy, but
that's where we're kind of coming from. You can teach to their strengths, and your elephant's going to have them. I forget where I forget how it's like, don't be disgruntled. Like if you're a can opener in an apple orchard, it doesn't mean you don't have purpose, right? Like you're not in the right place. So if you're in your
get
in
that
a
thing to a
situation,
kitchen.
right? Like you
Fast.
have use,
Right.
like everybody has strengths
Right.
and abilities, and it's you can really cultivate them as a homeschool mom
Now, currently,
or parent, whatever.
Corporations, they set these standards, a certain type of degree or whatever. And I've thought that stuff was arbitrary for the last 30 years.
It's coming down though.
I think it's going to go
a
away.
lot of that will go away. They'll look for skill set versus degree.
Right. I think there are going to be a
so.
lot of certification programs. And
that's coming.
they are way cheaper. And not necessarily easy, but they're a lot easier because you don't have the nonsensical stress of all kinds of other.
Return on investment.
Your return on investment is way higher than a 4-year degree in something that you may have changed your mind after the 3.5 year.
Right. You're stuck with it.
So, and I have one
What
last
else?
item that I would say. This is very select. It to educate children during family relocations or some form of crisis. I maybe, if you were homeschooled prior to, say, a Katrina event and your home was washed away.
Well, look at 2020 with COVID.
Okay.
That's a perfect example. Our kids did not suffer.
Oh, no. They
at all. Actually,
if we didn't tell them it was going on, they would be just asking why people are wearing a mask at the store.
Yeah.
But this also works for military families. I know there's a few out there that move around a lot. And if your child is homeschooled, the ease of it's much more seamless. It doesn't come without its edges, but it is much more seamless. Yeah. Once the curriculum is decided and the ball is only rolling, it really doesn't matter where, because we started homeschooling in a camper in Kentucky somewhere on our way to a museum. And we drove around the country for another month or so.
Yeah, we kicked off our...
And that was how we started homeschooling. Yeah. And, it's not like we ever did anything simple, right?
Yeah, never.
Never.
We'll go big or go home.
Yeah.
Speaking to that point, though, that you just made, it says here, like, even in 2021, like, so comparing 2020 and 2021 with the kids that, were in school, but then schools, had to shut down and go virtual versus homeschool kids were 14% less likely to suffer any kind of adverse reaction or adverse, like any kind of negative struggle as far as their education goes, because of upset or change. Like their lives really weren't as disrupted, with having
the parents' lives were disrupted.
Yeah,
the kids' lives, many
but the public
of which
school kids
improved.
were not.
Yeah.
Well, 14% more than homeschooled kids. They struggled 14% more than homeschool kids did during the pandemic and stuff like that. And it's because of their lives got turned. I mean, like our homeschool, we had some things that got canceled too. Like we have our homeschool co-op, or one of my kids was the lead in a play. Their end of the year concert got canceled. So there were things that did get canceled, but it wasn't so epic. And then as soon as we realized, like I think it was by Easter, so it was April 12th, 2020, we're like, oh, we used critical thinking skills and used it to assist the situation. We're like, well, let's just start having friends over. And so we did. And so we made sure that their mental health was our top priority. I have a health background. I took statistics in graduate school, so I can kind of interpret them and see okay, this is not what they're saying it is. Let's just live our lives. And so
I haven't anywhere near the credentials you have, but I mean, I've got 2 eyes in my head.
Critical thinking skills.
And I can look around and say, well, something doesn't seem quite to be as alarming as they initially said.
Yeah, sure.
I don't want myself to suffer. I certainly don't want my children to suffer. Yeah. And
so we were very intentional.
We very slowly, we started introducing, visitations. It felt like we were hiding from the communists, to be honest.
We texted our friends on a scale of 1 to 10. How comfortable are you to hang out? And all of them were like, "We're 10. Let's go. Let's do this." Yeah. So we made sure it was a big priority. So our kids didn't suffer depression, isolation. Mm-hmm. We didn't mask. We didn't make them feel isolated. We didn't want that neural pathway of anxiety and anxiousness and isolation and loneliness and fear built into their brains.
Fear.
That's
the critical
there's no biblical basis for it, and we said, forget it, we're going to do this. So anyway, but that's really a separate, this is kind of, now we're off.
Yeah.
We're off tangent.
That's your fault, you did that one.
Sorry, all me.
Not me this
but anyway,
time.
we hope this has given you enough I don't know, what, like enough ammo to kind of like get through that Thanksgiving dinner with at least confidence. Like, okay, you know what? This person, you know, you might feel attacked, and do not be shocked if you have that obnoxious relative quiz your children.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, what's this and what's that?
Yeah.
You know,
Don't get too mother bear about it.
You know,
Just,
it's annoying and it's obnoxious. And then you can teach your kids random facts before the holidays.
Tell your kid to call their lawyer.
But anyway,
Well,
yeah,
you
so
know,
hopefully this just gives you some encouragement.
let your heart be calm.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? You just started the year. Maybe it's you're arguing with. Why did I do
Oh,
this?
sure.
This isn't quite working out.
Right.
We're here to help you with that.
Right.
We're here to give you that encouragement because now the company's coming and
Mm-hmm.
it's a strange thought even still. Or, maybe they're familiar with the kids that were home and now finally they're back at school. And what do you mean? You're not sending them back?
Yeah.
What's wrong?
Right.
No, nothing's wrong. But I have these few statistics, and we're going to try to neaten up our notes and get a nice little link. And maybe can we make a printable out of it? You could hide it in the knife
now we're
drawer.
fancy.
But, yeah, I'm
we
I'm
can
writing
maybe
checks
do
with your body, right?
Yeah.
You could hide the notes, the cheat sheet in the utility drawer,
or even like tape it to your desk, so when you want to
Right.
call the local school to send them back because it's been a long day,
And
you
to
can
remind
kind of
yourself.
remind yourself, like,
Yeah.
no, this is really
Yeah.
for the good.
when Uncle
But-
Bill is telling you, "Oh, you're out of your mind," you can just let me go get something and just like check your sheet.
Yeah.
Did you know that 27% of students,
Right,
score
yeah.
higher?
Yeah. But I think, anyway, you can always, too, you can head over to spotlightonhome.com and you can
Please do.
grab, we do have a free PDF there if you're new to us, 10 tips to start homeschooling now. And that will get you started, too, and kind of like giving you a bit of a roadmap to get you launched and on your way. And then hopefully this has encouraged
Would
you.
you tell me? It's anybody who's already signed with us will get the cheat sheet
Yeah,
straight to their email.
If you sign up either for our wait list or for our
10 tips.
for the 10 tips to start homeschooling now, every week I send you the new podcast that we've created, so that you'll get this if you are already on our mailing list. But if you're not and you want to be, just go over there and sign up. Or just
Are we making a link?
yeah, I can make a link in
All right, then let's do
the
that.
show notes.
And then you can sign up and then you'll get all of our...
Yeah.
This is just another,
Yeah,
this
because
is
you don't want to
another
miss
landing
it. But
page. Yeah,
also,
wanna
if
miss
you
out.
don't mind to subscribe and like and share it,
Yeah.
we really want to get the word out.
These are on
about
YouTube
this.
also.
Yeah.
If you want to look at us
Poor thing.
for any weird reason. But there we are. You
make
don't
fun
have to... some people don't want to go through the podcast apps and stuff.
Right. Well, that's fine.
So we're out there. We're there for you. I want everyone to have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
enjoy.
Do not begrudge that family member who just doesn't understand you. They're ignorant. And I
Yeah.
mean that in the nicest possible way.
Anyway,
All right.
have a good week,
Have a
guys.
Be well. Take care.
Yeah. Bye-bye.